Now, you want to talk about something that's been a long time coming. I'm finally tackling one of the 3 major platformers of the PlayStation 2 era. Of course, if there's other games that I'm forgetting, I am all ears to let me know about that sort of shit, but like growing up on the subject of action-packed platformers, more than likely you were either talking Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, or Ratchet and Clank. Given the immense popularity and success of the PlayStation 2, these games were always front and center on gaming magazines or commercials. Sure enough, despite never really playing these games for myself, I was more than aware of them because I saw them on TV all the damn time. And the commercials alone was almost reason enough for me to give Ratchet and Clank a shot because I thought all those weapon demonstration ads were genuinely hilarious.
Today we're gonna test a tractor beam from Ratchet and Clank going commando. Oh, nice, dude. Nice job, nice job.
We're starting with Ratchet and Clank for a couple of reasons. Besides the commercials, out of the 3 platformers of this era, it was the one that looked the most interesting to me, the one that I thought, out of those 3 given, I would enjoy the most. Jak and Daxter had the Naughty Dog prestige, and I was a big Crash Bandicoot fan, sure, but Jak and Daxter didn't grab my attention in a similar manner. And Sly Cooper, I'll be honest, just slipped under my radar completely. It was the one I heard the least amount of, despite that game leaving its own mark on the console. Secondly, out of those 3, Ratchet and Clank was the one you guys wanted me to look at first and foremost, and I know Spyro fans might be feeling a little gypped at this point because the original creators of Ratchet and Clank was Insomniac Games, the same creators as Spyro the Dragon. And I know for some it might be weird that I'm heading into Insomniac Games' like second foray into the platforming scene without having any of the Spyro baggage, you could say, but I don't think that'd be really relevant when discussing the Ratchet and Clank series, and I'll try to be nice here. I'm sorry, but I've gotten a lot more requests for Ratchet and Clank than I have ever gotten for Spyro, and I am really sorry, just kind of like rubbing salt in the wound. I've always had more of an interest in Ratchet and Clank than I have for Spyro the Dragon. I honest to God gave Spyro a shot when it was first released. I played the first game, I thought it was fine, it was okay, but it wasn't enough to make me interested in future games with my attention span back then. If it didn't leave a lasting impression, I was quickly moving on to other things. All I can say is that Spyro will get his moment in the sun. That's only a matter of time, really. It's just not now. It was so interesting to learn because earlier you can convince me that these 2 studios were like rivals to each other, like playful rivals at the very least, because I recall when Crash 3 had that Spyro the Dragon demo built into it, and I don't think they'd do that unless they were like true rivals against each other, but no, it turns out they were total chums and they helped each other along in the process, which clearly worked given where the studios are nowadays. And I wonder, even after like 20 some odd years, if that sense of camaraderie is still there, and if so, when are we getting that Last of Us crossover with Spider-Man, and how long before that game gets remade? Our journey begins on planet Velden, where we see our main protagonist Ratchet tuning up his spaceship. Okay then, but enough about that. You'll be meeting a hefty number of characters along the way too, most of them being momentary one-offs that provide a singular purpose and then fuck off for the rest of the game, like Quark's personal trainer with this skateboarder named Skid McMarks. Like, even as a gag, why would you name yourself after a shit stain? I have to wonder who lost what bet. Though in Drek's case, it helps that his character is pretty entertaining thanks to him being voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who I think anyone who's watched any form of animated media in the past 20 years can immediately recognize.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Cut!
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, sniveling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my... We're still on? Well, turn it off, you idiot!
He's not as goofy as, say, Dr. Neocortex, but I think the evil businessman inherently has a more sinister aura than the standard mad scientist, especially as you get older in life, so I'd say Drek still delivers the goods. The story is relatively straightforward and simplistic, but the characters and the dynamic they share make up for it, and animation-wise, this shit is great. They had plenty of experience beforehand, but Insomniac made one hell of a first impression on the PS2 with character animations and expressiveness, really the whole shebang. Environments look great, I witnessed very little in graphical pop-up. I only saw a bit of slowdown here and there when things got hectic in combat, which I was already kind of expecting, so that's fine. Characters make great use of squash and stretch, the voice acting is good, as well as the lip syncing. The only real downside is Ratchet. His facial expressions get a little weird looking. It's the only thing I would call rough around the edges. And the game itself, man, I can't believe that this game, released in 2002, is a much better Shadow the Hedgehog than the actual Shadow the Hedgehog released in 2005. Good fucking lord. I mean, this game ain't perfect, I got shit to complain about, but I can safely say that this right here is a good game, and honestly, one I wish I played earlier in my youth. Whenever the game informed me that I needed a certain item for the next section and then later finding it, the most primal part of my brain started making monkey noises because it means, hey, I can finish off what I started in the previous world. The bolts you collect are not just for weapons and ammo, they're also needed for plot important items, and the game will just lock them behind paywalls. Now, given my playstyle where I explore every little bit that I can when possible, I never found myself short on cash and I always had more than enough to proceed. But I still don't like the idea of the paywall, especially in a platformer. Like, imagine playing a Crash Bandicoot game that locked progression because you didn't collect enough Wumpa Fruit or boxes or worse, gems. No, that'd be some dumb shit. But this game wants you to collect all those bolts, so make sure you do, otherwise you gotta grind, or worse, actually use something like that metal detector and waste time looking for loose change on the ground, completely breaking the pace. Or I don't know, Ratchet was a dick to Clank, so maybe he had this coming, the prick. However, it should be noted that Ratchet and Clank is meant to be played multiple times, as it does have a new game plus feature that lets you keep your weapons and bolts previously collected, so that you can eventually unlock those ridiculously overpowered guns like the gold weapons or even the Rhino, which stands for Rip Ya a New One, which I just love. And this gun fucking rocks as well. I couldn't help myself. I ended up doing a glitch that lets me go out of bounds and get to a spot to let me farm infinite bolts because I wanted to try this weapon out. It costs 150,000 bolts, which you're just not getting on your first playthrough by normal means. And this grinding method right here, fuck, this shit takes a while, so I ended up placing some tape on the controller and putting a weight on the circle button while I did other things around the house like Final Fantasy XIV roulettes and watching Black Lagoon. You don't need the Rhino for what it's worth. You can get something like the Tesla Claw later that's also pretty expensive even after getting the discount, but it's like a Ghostbusters Proton pack. It's so useful late game and against the final boss. Also just realized I made an Elon Musk comment earlier and there's a weapon in this game called the Tesla Claw. Ooh. Where does this series peak? How long before we reach the embarrassing midlife crisis? All this and more next time when we continue the Ratchet and Clank marathon with Ratchet and Clank Balls Out, Going Commando. Alright, let's keep things moving along now with the second of the PS2 Ratchet and Clank titles, Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, and this will be a recurring thing for future games, innuendos galore. Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, up your arsenal, quest for booty, size matters, full frontal assault. A crack in time's name was originally Clock Blockers, which was later rejected. Ooh, okay, Clock Blockers was too much, but Up Your Ass was just fine, then fuck out of here. They don't all have provocative titles, and I think most of the innuendos were dropped overseas, but I like to think it's only because they couldn't think of a clever pun that also worked within the game's themes. I respect the attempt at keeping the gag alive at least, and I personally can't wait for Ratchet and Clank Cocked and Loaded. After the defeat of Drek, Ratchet and Clank were celebrated as heroes and got to live a good life, for a little bit anyway, as the two are now spending their time twiddling their thumbs, waiting for their next calling. And after their latest interview, they're suddenly called to the Bogon Galaxy thanks to Abercrombie Fizzwidget, the CEO of Megacore, essentially that galaxy's Gadgetron. Fizzwidget requests Ratchet and Clank's assistance in retrieving an experiment they were working on that was recently stolen by this mysterious thief. As a signing bonus, I guess, they'd get a new apartment and Ratchet would receive special training to make him a professional badass, even learning some dancing and origami. So just 2 weeks later, I'm assuming Megacore has the fucking hyperbolic time chamber if that's all it takes to make a capable soldier around here, Ratchet is primed and ready to seek out the missing experiment and confront that mysterious thief. Okay, that's the basis. The rest of the story, it's just kind of going through the motions. That's the best way I can put it, I think. Maybe I was a little naive thinking that Insomniac had a greater scope in mind because... Okay, so it doesn't take long to confront the thief, right? You quickly learn that, maybe the thief isn't as menacing as they appear to be. You start to get the feeling that they're not that big of a threat. And then it's revealed that this thief is actually a woman named Angela Cross, former employee of Megacore, that actually wanted to keep the experiment away from the company as the creature can be duplicated to run amok across the galaxy, causing untold chaos if not handled properly. Okay, so she's not the actual bad guy, so what is it? Then we have these Thugs for Less goons, led by the thug leader that sporadically shows up, causing some problems for Ratchet on the occasion, but never enough to be more than an ass sore. It makes me wonder, what's the bigger picture here? The first game made it very clear that Drek was the head honcho, the main antagonist. Here I am a few hours in, and I'm not sure where this is all going, and I don't feel that this mystery is like deliberately played up in this case. It feels like the story is treading water until we get to an obligatory conclusion. So then you manage to get the experiment back to Fizzwidget, and there's this recurring thread where you're not sure if Fizzwidget is really a bad guy or is just super incompetent, and this is on top of having to deal with the thief and then the thug leader. It's getting very muddled. Then it's revealed that Fizzwidget is actually Captain Quark in disguise, something that in my opinion is not so subtly hidden.
This is bad.
All right, just what the is going on?
because throughout the game, Ratchet and Clank view these Captain Quark documentaries, detailing the rise and fall of the superhero, and you know they wouldn't be spending so much time on these if there wasn't some sort of payoff. And with Fizzwidget acting more and more antagonistic as the game proceeds, that right there I feel gives the whole thing away, and now you're just waiting for them to pull the trigger on it, which doesn't happen until the final 10 minutes of the game, and after that it ends. I was so caught off guard when the credits rolled, not expecting it to just suddenly end like that. I don't know. If Going Commando was, say, a 3-act play, Quark being revealed as the mastermind should have been like the end of Act 2, with the whole other act dedicated to his schemes. I think that's my problem with Going Commando's story. It never feels like we're properly building to any sort of climax. It is treading water. It's an unfocused wild goose chase that's littered with ads from Megacore, and you don't have ad blocker installed. As it is, he just kind of comes and goes with the wind, and it ends with him getting testicular torture. I'm gonna give Going Commando this though. The humor is great. It's the best part of the game. As previously, there's a lot of characters you meet that supply the laughs, and overall I found this game to be funnier than the first. Fizzwidget drove me insane with his butchering of the English language that wore thin incredibly fast. Like, even as a bit, I felt, oh my god, it's kind of hard to make out what this guy's even saying.
But our entire galaxy is in a very precocious situation. I must humbly request your sustenance on a mission of dire urgitude, a mission of superfluous peril, a mission of unequivocal imperitude.
Did that make any sense?
But given who he really is, it makes sense. Quark would butcher the language just to piss Ratchet off, piss me off by extension, really helps sell the fact that Quark is a dude you just want to punch in the face. The Thug Leader was a fine character too. I love the fact that his Thugs for Less company, a band of hitmen and mercenaries, have pizza parties for good performance and practice good work ethics altogether like they're everyday workers. Outside of helping Megacore spread the proto-pet menace for profit, working for this dude doesn't look like it'd be the worst thing in the world.
In Sector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're no good with numbers, find a buddy to help you. Lastly, the company picnic is this Sunday. And don't forget to bring your own juice this time. Hey! I saw that, Cletus! You just earned yourself a write-up.
Don't worry. The boss only yells because he loves us.
So the first game, right, was no stranger to mocking capitalist ideals. Some of you in the comments were even quick to point out that the very existence of the paywalls in the first game were supplementing that very notion. Okay, fair enough, I can buy that for $1. Here though, they go fucking balls to the wall ham, mocking capitalism and consumerism.
Let's get the goods on that experiment. What the?
I think I see the problem.
What? Now even the computers are charging us? That's it. This galaxy blows.
With all these Megacore ads and documentaries you watch as you progress through the story, I felt like I was watching a RoboCop spinoff. Given the franchise's love of innuendos, Ratchet and Clank would unironically try and sell me a gun called the SUX 6000. But with Going Commando here, I feel the priority was put more into the yucks than making a clear enough point A to point B story. I thought Angela Cross could have mattered a little more in this adventure. From the beginning, it's clear that she's set up to be threatening, yet clumsy, but after her identity is revealed, her significance and screen time peter out so hard, so fast. Her previous history as a Megacore employee has some payoff, and ultimately what leads to the heroes coming out on top, but I think the logical thing to do would make her a playable character in some fashion. I feel a lot more could have been done with Angela, though it looks like she's here to stay going by the ending of the game, so maybe next time. This was really fun to do. I love the challenges this came with. One of them being very reminiscent of the jetpack levels of Crash 2. But this levitate thing controls much better for one thing, and secondly, the jetpack has numbed all sensation in my soul, and Ratchet and Clank couldn't hurt me even if it tried. But Going Commando's new arsenal of weapons, man, it fucking blows the previous game's selection out of the park if you ask me, and some now even have a manual lock-on. You gotta buy the upgrade for that first, yeah, and I hope in future games it's just embedded into the guns automatically, but this is a start. It really came in handy because now all my bullets were hitting the targets they're supposed to hit. This is great. I want to stress I did not get to test all the weapons available, at least not until post-game where I had the extra balls to spare and I was curious, and all I can say is that I'm really glad I didn't invest in that lava gun. But I still had my fun with the decent chunk of weapons I did invest in, and I was able to find my comfort zone in no time at all. Hell, for me it started as early as the first few weapons you get, the Lancer and the Gravity Bomb. As they were, one was like an improved blaster from the first game, and the Gravity Bomb was a more destructive bomb glove. The Blitz gun, this game's shotgun, say less. Loved this weapon early on, great for crowd control. But then I saw that in this game, weapons evolve after you use them enough times, upgrading to much more powerful and destructive weapons, and my face when I learned about this was nothing short of orgasmic. Okay then, getting some RPG elements in my Ratchet and Clank. I love to see it. But once I got the bolts to unlock
The Bouncer,
and later the plasma coil, that was all she wrote. Those became my main weapons. And they weren't cheap. Both cost over 100,000 bolts from what I remember, which isn't too far off from how much the Rhino cost in the first game. But Going Commando showers you in bolts from basic level progression and the different challenges offered to you in the game's battle arenas or hover bike races and starship battles. Going Commando gives you so much opportunity to earn a ton of bolts if you just put a little time into it, and a lot of times I did just that, sometimes against my better judgment. The desert planet. You need to collect 10 of these purple crystals to repair your ship, but once I saw the size of the level map and also saw that there are more than 10 crystals to collect, I said to myself, okay, I am positive there's about 100 of these things, and I think collecting them will get me something other than a skill point. Like, this is too much work for it to just be an achievement, I thought. So I combed the whole fucking thing as soon as I could, which I would not recommend doing, by the way, until you get the mapper and charge boots later in the game. The mapper pinpointing the crystal's exact locations on the map, with the charge boots allowing you to fast travel on the ground. I really should have waited for these looking back, but you know what? I'm not too ass hurt about that. Because once I did collect the last crystal and saw the payout I received when I delivered them, straight into the bouncer it went, and I felt so fucking invincible afterwards. It's such a good weapon that only gets better after you level it up, or when you modify with the platinum bolts you collect. This game's equivalent of the gold bolts from last time. I find it funny that the basic currency of Going Commando are gold bolts, and the platinum bolts, which is the same color as the basic currency from the first game, are considered rare here. If only Ratchet had the hindsight. Could have made a killing. Leveling also applies to your health bar too. The more enemies you kill, the larger your maximum HP gets. That is seriously great, and by the second half of the game you'll be glad you did this, because some of these fuckers, even with these added armor upgrades you can purchase later, they still hit your ass like freight trains, or in the Yetis from Planet Grelbin's case, hit like freight trains that also come in groups of 5 and 6. I've heard horror stories about these creatures from friends before, and I can say that those stories were no jokes. These guys suck. Apparently these enemies were so disliked by fans and Insomniac staff themselves that they made an in-house reward called the Snow Beast Award, given to the person who developed the worst thing about the game that they worked on. It's considered a badge of honor, so I have to wonder if anybody in Insomniac with future games deliberately made something horrible just to get this thing on their shelf. The D-pad is still used as a second means of movement and not a dedicated hot swap for weapons, so you still gotta hold one button down and scroll through the wheel with the analog stick. Though I like that the game now momentarily freezes as you make your selection, so you don't have to worry about getting in a real-time tizzy when you're deciding your best course of action. This game went and made some tools context sensitive. When it's time to use them, you just hit the proper button to use it lickety-split, like this game's Electrolyzer and the Infiltrator. And my compliments, this is the kind of change I wanted to see. It frees up inventory slots for other things. But this was only done selectively. Items like the returning swing shot or the dynamo, which creates holographic platforms in specific areas, and the Terminator, essentially this game's hydro displacer, are still separate items that need to be equipped first before they could be used for their momentary purpose. In fact, if I were to compare, I found myself pausing the game and fiddling with the inventory more times in Going Commando than I did in the first game, given how often you needed to use these tools to progress through the game. So if you want my advice, dedicate 4 slots of your weapon wheel to tools and leave the rest for your weapons. You're still pausing a lot, but it's less of a hassle. I know it may seem strange that this is such an issue for me, because when you get down to it, what is so different here than, say, managing your inventory and equipment in a Zelda game? I think it has to do with the game's sense of flow, its pacing. Ratchet and Clank is far more adrenaline-filled than the slower, methodical Zelda title, so I think in Zelda's case, it's easier to absorb, where Ratchet and Clank, where I want to keep things moving, it can feel more intrusive. Although I do recall having similar inventory complaints for Link's Awakening DX and the Game Boy, so I guess even in Zelda's case, it's case by case. Now we're talking only mere seconds of time, but it adds up. It's basically the same complaint I had as last time, so again, I have to wonder, how will future games tackle this, if at all? Right besides this dickhead, the final encounter against the thug leader on planet Snivlack. I don't know who thought giving this asshole so much health was a good idea, but I hope they got a Snow Beast award for their troubles. It took me 15 fucking minutes to finish this guy. Fucking love bullet sponges, man. I used the turrets on the rooftops, a few points I used my other weapons, but this guy's health was just not... What is going on there? I legit wondered, am I doing something wrong? Is it supposed to take this long? When I made a post about him on my Twitter and seeing all you guys react negatively to the guy, it was then that I knew, oh no, this is just how this boss was designed. Although a few of you have also made me aware of the quick kill with the sheepinator, so next time I'll be sure to do that instead. What a pain in the ass. I really hope this isn't a recurring thing. The actual final boss wasn't nearly as taxing, though looking back, this thing should have been the last boss because this giant fuzzy testicle with teeth was too easy by comparison. You got me. So yeah, this game's got a few snags and the story didn't really land for me, but my experience with going commando was still super great. God, that sounds so weird out of context. So okay, will it get even better next time? We shall find out with Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal, or Ratchet and Clank 3, as it's called in Europe, you fucking cowards. But as always, thank you all for watching. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. If you decide to go outside, get vaccinated if it's possible. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, ring the bell. Bake at 350 degrees until golden brown. Poke with a fork to ensure. If you thought Ratchet got off too easy with his dickish behavior in the first game, Up Your Arsenal should make you positively giddy with the number of times everyone makes Ratchet here feel so secondary. Even though again he does all the heavy lifting. My dude must have pulled the Rodney Dangerfield in his last tarot card reading, gets no respect. And it is all played for laughs of course, but I honestly started to feel a little bad for the dude. I guess Angela Cross was also a one and done deal because her ass just fucking vanished and she's nowhere to be seen in this game at all, bearing one small cameo at the very end of the game. And for some reason she's back in her thief costume again. Okay. But the Rangers believe that the next step is locating Captain Quark, who went missing after the whole Megacorp incident, and because he was at one time Dr. Nefarious' arch nemesis, they believe he might be the key to ending Nefarious' schemes once and for all. They gotta find Quark first, but that doesn't take very long. However, with him suddenly getting a case of the monkeys, they gotta knock some sense into him first to help regain his memories, which I took the utmost joy in doing because this guy, after what he did in the last two games, is a fucking asshole. It's funny how in my first Ratchet and Clank review, I thought that Drek being an evil businessman hit different than your standard mad scientist, and then I get to this game and we get the mad scientist and he ends up being one of my favorite characters in the franchise so far. I love Dr. Nefarious and his butler Lawrence. It's a juxtaposition I've seen a million times, the bumbling villain and his indifferent lackey, but their dynamic is still so good here, and Nefarious speaking mostly in screams just made me laugh more than anything the series has provided me so far.
Say, maybe they'll change your show to Secret Agent Clunk. Did you hear that, Lawrence?
You put the wit in twit, sir.
A part of me even wanted him to succeed because a part of why he became evil was because in his youth, Quark was such a dickhead to this dude. I'm gonna say right now, Quark gets off too easily in this franchise so far. Yeah, you beat him up, he gets humbled, shit, the vid comics you collect constantly hammer in how pathetic he actually is. But considering his previous crimes, straight up, this dude should still be in jail, and he can only be so entertaining before I start to question, why is he still out and about being able to do what he wants? Maybe it's just me, I'd love to hear what you think about this. But I found Up Your Arsenal's brand of satire this go around to not be as bitey as before. Maybe by the end of Going Commando, the writers ran empty on the Paul Verhoeven tank and kept the humor outside of the James Bond stuff to be more straightforward and cartoony. There's a Britney Spears knockoff in this game called Courtney Gears working under Nefarious, promiscuous pop idol extraordinaire that uses her fame and songs to proclaim her want and need for humanity's extinction. Awesome, looking forward to the Kids Bop version already. But that's what I mean with the more straightforward humor. Here's just a Britney Spears parody and sure, Britney Spears was very popular at this game's release, so let's just reference that. Was not ready for Ratchet doing whatever the fuck this was, though.
She always seems so sweet and innocent in her videos. Well, except for that one with the, you know.
But at the same time, because of those removed elements, this game never fucking stops. Again, it is so consistent now. It's a combat-filled adrenaline rush that gives you plenty of new tools to use, plenty of bad guys to mow down, and more explosions than you can count. So much more, in fact, that the slowdown was at its most obnoxious here. Again, I have been playing the original PlayStation 2 releases of these games, so I'm sure this really isn't a thing in the HD collection. But I don't know, sometimes I think the slowdown added to the combat appeal. Felt very Matrix at times, watching Ratchet doing the strafe jumps in slow motion and all that, which, speaking of real quick, holy fuck you guys. So I want to make it known that the control style I picked for my first playthrough of Up Your Arsenal was the new lock strafe mode. Essentially a third-person mode with twin-stick shooter controls. It worked like a dream, combat never felt so smooth. This is how I'm going to play Ratchet and Clank games from now on, assuming they all have this control style. But the number of people that were up my ass in the last two videos because apparently I didn't use the strength enough for them. The games are still more than playable. I think I said I enjoyed both games anyway. It's my first time at that.
So right now, what I need is for you to climb down out of my ass.
And another thing, why would I know about the Insomniac Museum and Going Commando? I don't watch long plays before playing the games for myself, guys. I go in them blind. Jesus Christ, if I don't talk about it, it ain't the end of the world. Don't make me the Joker in this journey, but I do appreciate that sweet, sweet viewer engagement. Level design has been both streamlined and compromised to a degree. I can't immediately recall an instance that required backtracking outside of something optional, like getting some of the Going Commando weapons because I had a save file from my previous adventure. That got a bit annoying too. I go through like half of the game with only the lava gun and mini turret available, and then suddenly the bouncer's available. Alright, I gotta go back and get the bouncer. I do another planet and then the plasma coil's available. Alright, gotta go back and get the plasma coil now. And then later the shield charge. Slim, my man, just airmail me this shit next time, my dude. God. So if you really enjoyed the platforming part of previous games, you will no doubt notice the de-emphasis of it here. Like, there's still plenty of it, but it's clear that wasn't the focus. Let's put it this way. I ended up scoring about 13 platinum bolts just by playing normally. In this game, these don't require nearly as much effort to get, but I'm happy I got enough to get the tuxedo for Ratchet. That hairpiece is fucking atrocious though. Why did they give him that? As the name Up Your Arsenal implies, the focus was on your ass. I mean, Arsenal. Frankly, what I find so damn impressive about all of this is that the game still managed to be a ton of fun despite its crunch developmental period. I don't condone that practice at all. I'd rather developers have the time needed to make the game they really want without succumbing to deadlines whenever possible. But if it means anything, especially as someone playing this for the first time nearly 20 years after the fact, this game is fantastic. It's lost a bit of identity from Going Commando, and it's clear in hindsight where corners were cut to save on development time. I mean, the arena battles are practically ripped wholesale from Going Commando. I am still amazed this game turned out as good as it did despite the circumstances. Once again, I didn't get bored, I didn't get frustrated, the weapons were great, the combat was smooth, the boss fights were stellar. No obnoxious HP sponges this time, and no Yetis. That could be enough to put Up Your Arsenal above Going Commando. That argument could be made. It has an entertaining story with a supremely entertaining villain.
Auto-destruct sequence initiated. Prepare to die.
Lawrence, teleport us out of here.
Of course, sir.
Lawrence? This isn't funny, Lawrence!
However, since we're getting close to the end of this marathon, I figured I'd get started on the second marathon I have planned for the summer. And for those that attended this year's Too Many Games, you already know what I have in store. If not, well, you'll see for yourself. But as always, thank you all for watching. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask if you decide to go outside, get vaccinated if it's possible. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, ring the bell, have yourself a fantastic... You know what, I think I have a way to get rid of this fucking bloated outro starting with the next video. Well, maybe not the next video, but the video after that. We'll wait and see. And no, I didn't forget the head word for this video. I'm going all natural for today because my old hats are getting dusty and dirty. I didn't bother washing them in time for this video, so I'm just gonna rock the bald look. Although, as long as I've been doing this videos, like 10 years at this point for Johnnyverse specifically, I'm still looking for a replacement of that hat I used to wear. It was back in 2012, way back in the beginning of Johnnyverse's stuff, where you got the little notches and the stitching on the side. I love that hat, and I could never find another one like it after that old hat got dirty and musty and I had to throw it away. So if anybody knows where I can get that exact make and model of that hat for my large ass head, for the record, I think I work a 2X for fitted caps. Please hit me up on my Twitter at SomecallmeJohnny or in the comment section below. Please, I would love to get another hat like that. I really love that hat. And no, I didn't forget the head word for this video. I'm going all natural for today because my old hats are getting dusty and dirty. I didn't bother washing them in time for this video, so I'm just gonna rock the bald look. Although, as long as I've been doing this videos, like 10 years at this point for Johnnyverse specifically, I'm still looking for a replacement of that hat I used to wear. It was back in 2012, way back in the beginning of Johnnyverse's stuff, where you got the little notches and the stitching on the side. I love that hat, and I could never find another one like it after that old hat got dirty and musty and I had to throw it away. So if anybody knows where I can get that exact make and model of that hat for my large ass head, for the record, I think I work a 2X for fitted caps. Please hit me up on my Twitter at SomecallmeJohnny or in the comment section below. Please, I would love to get another hat like that. I really love that hat. But let's get back to business. We are now at the last of the PlayStation 2 Ratchet and Clank games. Though Ratchet and Clank isn't in the name, it's just Ratchet. Ratchet Deadlocked. And the cover has given me some real Bomberman Act Zero vibes, which I guess it's not that out there looking back, given that Ratchet grimacing for the cover is nothing new. But Deadlock's cover elicits an edge that I shouldn't be terribly surprised seeing if that was the intention going forward. Like, I never played the Jak and Daxter games growing up, but even I know that series became more serious as it continued, and knowing that Insomniac and Naughty Dog were buddies, maybe Insomniac games wanted to try something similar, but not to a T. According to the devs, Ratchet Deadlock started as a Ratchet and Clank racing game featuring vehicular combat like the Twisted Metal series. But when Insomniac caught wind of Naughty Dog developing Jak X, a vehicular combat game with the Jak series, Insomniac probably went, "Fuck!" and decided to make the fourth game a standard RC title with a darker tone and premise inspired by Bungie's Halo series at the time. Well, I do love me some Halo, but I don't think the Halo vibes really go any farther than the stronger emphasis on gunfights and Ratchet's new Spartan-esque combat armor, which I want to say now, not a real fan of it. Though it is in service to the game's darker tone, I don't like the lower poly count on Ratchet's body compared to other combat armor he's worn in the past. I see Ratchet's cartoonish head stick out of this thing, and it just looks wrong, but not in a funny haha sense. It's more oil and water clashing. His in-game animations also look more stiff and rigid, not having the same squash and stretch as before. Apparently the emphasis on lower poly models was to make the game's multiplayer less strenuous on the system. And you know what? Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, like an Up Your Arsenal, Ratchet Deadlock also had online multiplayer, which no longer works of course, but it still supports local split-screen co-op for the main campaign. You can play all story mode with a buddy if you want, which I didn't do for this video, going solo as always of course, but I appreciate the option given. Just make sure your TV is large enough to get a good idea of where you're going and doing. This split screen is Resident Evil 5 crunchy. Ratchet and friends find themselves in the Shadow Sector where laws don't matter, and they got explosive collars attached to their necks that'll detonate if they don't obey the one responsible for this whole mess, Gleeman Vox of the Vox Network, a greedy business shark whose face reminds me a little too much of Robert De Niro's shark character from Shark Tale. Thanks for that, Deadlocked. I really could have done without the two announcers personally, Dallas and Juanita. I know they're just as much victims as Ratchet, forced to run a slander campaign because of Gleeman, but that's not revealed until the end of the game, and maybe if that was shown earlier I'd be more sympathetic to them. I wouldn't have minded so much, but no, for the whole adventure it's just the same repeated commentary and quips on how Ratchet sucks or how Dallas pronounces Juanita's name weird.
I'll bet he doesn't have any trouble getting a close shave, Juanita. You get it?
Shut up, Dallas, you're not that funny.
Alright. In small doses, they would have been fine, but since they follow you through the whole game, they wore thin fast for me. I did appreciate the return of the comically dark advertisements, an element I missed in Up Your Arsenal. In a place like the Shadow Sector, yeah, let Reactor fucking murder a kid to sell a card game. I feel these should have been the sole means of establishing how much of a shit show the Shadow Sector was, but again, the non-stop announcer commentary just dulled my senses in a game that's already sort of dulling my senses in other ways. More on that in a bit. Don't ask me about the soundtrack. I don't remember any of it. That's been a thing with me for the past couple of games if you couldn't tell already. Had a few of you tell me, Johnny, you didn't talk about the music. And yeah, I know. And it's because I didn't really find anything memorable on the ears at first listen, outside of the first game's soundtrack, which I still think is the best one so far. The other game's soundtracks place more emphasis on the high-octane circumstances given life to the here and now, which is fine, but I felt this came with the consequence of a lot of tracks sounding like one another, homogenous. The first game's soundtrack, I felt, did a better job in giving every planet a personality. No track felt overproduced or overbearing, reserved when it needed to be, action-packed when it needed to be. So there you go.
Well, you've obviously made some sort of idiotic mistake. Report to B-level for disintegration.
Yes, sir.
But if you can, I would still recommend playing the original PlayStation 2 release as I did for this video, if it's within reasonability, since I hear the HD version is not the best port. Maybe that's why Ratchet's back to his original look from the first game. Use what you know. I might be misremembering a bit, but was his head always that large? He looks more like someone wearing a Ratchet fursuit than the genuine article.
ユウタさんすごいっす。やだな、こんなのいらないよ。本当に困るな。よし、任せな。やったっす。ラチェットやったっす。
So then it became a matter of which version was I going to look at for these videos. Judging by your responses and recommendations, it didn't make that very clear at all. I had people tell me, oh dude, play the original PSP release, the PS2 versions are so bad. But I also had plenty of people on the other side tell me the exact opposite. A Ratchet and Clank tug of war, you could say, so who do I believe? Let's come out of my pocket anyway. So I originally had the intent of looking at the PlayStation Portable versions for this video. These were originally handheld games, so I wanted to play them in the proper context. But that sure as shit didn't last long. I couldn't stomach more than half an hour of Size Matters on the PSP. I just want to say now the game looks and sounds great. Kudos to High Impact Games for making it look as good as it did without too much compromise. It looks like a standard Ratchet and Clank game, but the fundamental issues were apparent from minute one. The camera was way too close to Ratchet for my liking, and on the PSP the only camera control you got are on the shoulder buttons. You can set the camera to always follow Ratchet from behind to help circumvent the rigid turning, but this has the consequence of making Ratchet's movement feel more sluggish. Turning now feels very loose. Movement and strafing were separated in this too. I wasn't too surprised by this, seeing as the PSP only had one analog stick, but it was weird having to use the D-pad for basic third-person movement and having to use the analog stick to strafe, and that was after setting the strafing controls to the analog stick, because by default, I think it's like old school Ratchet and Clank where you had to hold one of the shoulder buttons down before you could begin strafing at all. Again, not that big of a deal, but muscle memory from my previous ventures and how fundamentally clunky this felt made it very difficult for me to adjust. Too difficult in fact, which is why I switched over to the PlayStation 2 version, so that I could at least have camera controls closer to the original game. Ratchet and Clank were taking some time off relaxing on the beach when a small child named Luna wanted to take pictures for a school report on Heroes, requests that Ratchet show off his skills so that she can see firsthand what it looks like to see a hero in action. Ratchet is all too happy to oblige, but soon after Luna is suddenly kidnapped by robots and whisked away, dropping an artifact that Clank believes belongs to the ancient Technomites, giving them an idea on Luna's captors. Ratchet, on the other hand, being a Technomite atheist, you could say, doesn't even believe they really exist, but it's all moot as Ratchet just wants to save the girl in the end anyway. So Ratchet and Clank set off to rescue Luna and stop the Technomites, but it's revealed to be a ruse as Luna is actually a robot constructed by the Technomites, all in an effort to lure Ratchet to their base so that they can extract his DNA and clone him to form the ultimate army that the leader of the Technomites, Auto Destruct, will then use to rule the galaxy and then absorb the knowledge of all of its inhabitants to become all-powerful and all-knowing. You know, like how the Riddler handled things in Batman Forever. So that's what I immediately thought of. Ratchet, by the way, does not take kindly to the idea of being used and cloned, and I thought for a second, holy shit, this is the game where Ratchet goes to the dark side like Jack did in Jak 2, because Ratchet is so pissed that he was experimenting on that you think they killed his parents or some other shit. It changed the tone of the narrative so hard and fast, my dude is fuming.
Nobody messes with me like this.
At least the humor is still on point. I'm glad to say that Size Matters for how thin the narrative is. Still delivered on the laughs that itself isn't as prevalent as before, but the effort's still there and I welcome it.
Any robots found there without being on fire will be set on fire, then fired.
If we want to start at the absolute bottom, the camera work is so fucking trash in this. In every recording session, I ran into some degree of camera hiccups. I'm talking obscured views leaving everything to my imagination. This happens a lot, I cannot stress that enough. Sometimes it got too close to Ratchet in the middle of combat. Some of the given angle straight up obscuring bottomless pits. That especially got under my skin. And this is the PS2 version where I'm actually allowed to tilt the camera up and down. I can't imagine how infuriating this would have been on the PSP. I can't say if this happens on both versions, but on the PS2, a few technical issues reared their ugly head too. Nothing game breaking, it just left me feeling awkward. There's a boss sequence against Luna, and it starts with Ratchet getting chased in a cornfield as Luna tries to mow him down in the biplane. I gotta say, that's a very odd time for a North by Northwest reference if that was their intention. But sometimes, when you die, the music would just cut out. And now you're doing this intense chase sequence to the sound of nothing. Now this is some fucked up ASMR. If we want to start at the absolute bottom, the camera work is so fucking trash in this. In every recording session, I ran into some degree of camera hiccups. I'm talking obscured views leaving everything to my imagination. This happens a lot, I cannot stress that enough. Sometimes it got too close to Ratchet in the middle of combat. Some of the given angle straight up obscuring bottomless pits. That especially got under my skin. And this is the PS2 version where I'm actually allowed to tilt the camera up and down. I can't imagine how infuriating this would have been on the PSP. I can't say if this happens on both versions, but on the PS2, a few technical issues reared their ugly head too. Nothing game breaking, it just left me feeling awkward. There's a boss sequence against Luna, and it starts with Ratchet getting chased in a cornfield as Luna tries to mow him down in the biplane. I gotta say, that's a very odd time for a North by Northwest reference if that was their intention. But sometimes, when you die, the music would just cut out. And now you're doing this intense chase sequence to the sound of nothing. Now this is some fucked up ASMR. So I already touched on the control issues earlier. The PlayStation 2 version does mitigate that by giving us more real estate on the controller. I got no problems controlling Ratchet or Clank in this. They move fine, they jump fine. The jump hovering is almost obnoxiously slow. This definitely could have been sped up. Jesus Christ. Speaking of hovering, the hoverboard racing. Shit sucks. There's no grace in your movement. It feels very knee-jerk, snapping hard left or right with even the slightest touch of the D-pad or analog stick, making it extra cumbersome to stay in your lane. I didn't mind the actual hovering feature where you can basically fly for a short amount of time with no real restrictions. With enough fuel pickups, you can turn the tide so fast in this, which I managed to do in the last mandatory race. I fucked up so much in this run. Collided with so many walls, fell down so many pits, and somehow, someway, I still managed to come out on top. Thanks to the hovering ability, though the AI being absolutely brain dead is also a major contributor too. A victory so undeserved, but you take those wins anyway. But I did not bother with the extra challenges for bolts because I hated these that much. Nope, control felt like ass, only gonna do the bare minimum and move on. And thankfully I can get away with that as progression isn't locked behind any paywalls and such. And I felt a little bad about skipping the side missions because normally I like to do some of the extra work so that I can amass the extra bolts so that I can purchase other weapons as soon as I can, so that I can also level them up as soon as I can. This game's weapons though, what the fuck? They are so weak! Even after upgrading some of them to max, it takes so many fucking shots just to bring even the basic ass goons down. The shotgun, what happened here? These guys should be long dead, but it takes like 7 to 8 shots at point blank to even lay a dent on them. I only used like 3 weapons consistently through the whole game because of this wacky ass damage output. The starting pistols, because they had the most ammo, the shotgun, because I was in denial, and the rocket launcher, which was like the only way I managed to take out the final boss because this dude's a goddamn HP sponge otherwise, on par with the giant robot and going commando, and he has instant kill attacks. God. I also enjoyed Ratchet's armor system to some extent. So as you're playing the game, you'll start collecting armor pieces. Very Mega Man X, that's what I thought of anyway. You get added defense for each piece, but if you manage to collect all 4 pieces of a set, you not only get great defense, but an added perk, like a fire effect added to your melee attacks. Honestly, I thought this was a cool idea. But this was kind of a double-edged sword for me, because after I completed my first armor set, I really didn't want to switch to any other armor piece until I completed another set. So what this meant is that I stuck with the fire armor longer than what was probably intended, and midway through, enemies were just ripping my asshole apart. So I bit the bullet and just started throwing armor pieces on just to get my defense up, which also meant I was no longer getting any additional side effects. Though I did learn that there are hidden combinations of different pieces that grant different perks, but I only learned about that after the fact, so maybe I'll take advantage of that during my next playthrough sometime later this century. Honestly, I think what saves size matters from being a straight up bad time from beginning to end is that the game isn't long enough for any of my gripes to really seep in and ruin my whole experience, but the experience was still forgettable and mundane. Like, I didn't even mention how the game made stuff like the swing shot a separate tool again, and it was a little annoying having to switch stuff out like before, or the very specific watering can, it's what it is. You only really use these for plants and nothing else. Okay. The titanium bolts, I found a couple of these, never found out what they were used for, didn't really care enough to find out afterwards. If I wasn't playing this for a video, I probably would have stopped playing earlier just because of the camera shenanigans and weaker gunplay. They are so weak in this game. But before you know it, your runtime of the current world is over and you're off to the next planet. Nothing in this game stuck out as amazing to me. Most worlds were inoffensive. Oh, never mind that shit. Here comes Mungo! The only other sequence that immediately comes to mind was the mindfuck when Ratchet was unconscious. Now this was fun in a trippy way, loved the low quality JPEGs of classic Ratchet and Clank villains just floating around, but I did like this place. This whole thing is a ginormous James Bond spoof, from Clank's attire, the gadgets he can use to complete missions, and the many femme fatales that are as sexy as they are dangerous. This one's got some massive fucking knockers though. You know, whoever oversaw modeling this one was likely having the time of their life. There's yet again a subplot involving Captain Quirk as he travels around the galaxy feeding this dude a whole bunch of bullshit to sell his upcoming memoirs. It only really ties into the main plot at the end, but you know what? I didn't mind these from a writing standpoint because this is something up Quirk's alley. It makes sense for the guy to do something like this, unlike the parental stuff from Size Matters, and it does lead to some of the game's best jokes, the opera scene being the highlight. Not every day where I see a progression meter tied to someone's ass cheek.
I swam right under it and plugged the leak with just my left butt cheek.
I also laughed how the guys in the snow level said "wee" when we all jumped off the cliffside. But for those itching for something more traditional, there's not much here, but Ratchet does get a few dedicated bits as he bides his time in prison. It's essentially the arena challenges from going commando and up your arsenal, but that's it. There's no platforming and all that other jazz. On the plus side, the damage output seems to be back to normal and they brought back the lock strafe control, so already I'm feeling more at ease here. But it's just Ratchet against a bunch of prison inmates, so it isn't as visually stimulating as one might expect. They even added sensor bars on the naked inmates, the fucking cowards. Captain Quirk also gets a few sections as he retells his tales of bullshit heroism to this poor sap, who doesn't buy any of this shit but secretly works for Clunk, so he's gotta bear with it for the time. Anyway, these aren't anything special. They have some charm, as Quirk's narration repeatedly changes the circumstance of the situation as he keeps talking, and I really like that. Again, the visual humor in these sections are some of the best jokes in the game, but the gameplay is very one-note and repetitive. You either blast things with your meager gun or awkwardly punch things until the stage ends, which takes fucking forever. Holy shit, this is the biggest problem I have with this game. It is fundamentally solid. The core gameplay itself is fine, but there are so many sections in this game that go on for too fucking long, and it ruins what's otherwise a perfectly playable game. There's this bit in the casino, right? Torturous. The rhythm game during poker, I was initially enjoying this sequence, loving how more nonsensical the game became with the random trivia questions and all that, but then you gotta control the drones for a bit to stop the others from cheating, and then you're back to the rhythm game for a bit, and then you're back to the drones again. It just kept on going when this joke should have ended like 10 minutes ago. The opera bit with Quirk. I love the dedication to the presentation with Quirk even singing his own opera tune, but it overstays its welcome. Just when you think the show is over, watching the curtains fall for what feels like the 5th fucking time, nope, the curtains are rising yet again, holy shit, this is still going! Most of the vehicle sections are too long. The stealth bits with the hologram disguises are too long. The last few drone sections with the switch flicking and the pole swinging are too long. My god, the Mexican standoff with Quirk and the aliens takes so fucking long. Preventing Mexican aliens from destroying a wall. That is like milk. I was hoping we wouldn't end things on a collective meh, but I guess that's on me for deciding to end this marathon with PlayStation Portable spinoffs.